Kelsey Russell, the media literate hottie, is a content creator and full-time graduate student at Teachers College at Columbia University. Kelsey Russell believes education should be entertaining, and entertainment should be educational. This mantra comes to life on her TikTok page of almost 100,000 followers, where she dynamically reads different forms of print media to her audience. By promoting an approach to new information from a state of curiosity and nostalgia, she hopes to make generations fall back in love with learning. Kelsey graduated from Boston University with a BA in sociology and is originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Many people don't know that Kelsey comes from a lineage of entrepreneurs. Her grandfather, Herman J. Russell, founded H.J. Russell and Company, which specializes in construction, project management, and real estate development, and has been prolific in the development of the Atlanta area for over 70 years. In this episode, Kelsey and I discuss what it's like to grow up in a family of entrepreneurs, her rise to fame on TikTok teaching media literacy, how her content is helping to fund local news, and how she's establishing herself as an entrepreneur. So people know a little bit about you as a TikToker, as a content creator, but I want people to know the behind the screen Kelsey. Like, who is Kelsey Russell behind TikTok?
Yes. Okay. I'm a graduate student, but I'm honestly, I would say I'm a friend to people. I am an outside girly. Like I run into people almost every weekend that follow my TikTok. Like I be out in the club, I be outside. So that is one thing about me. But besides like my leisurely time, I've always loved anything that has to do with family, fashion, wellness, and travel. Travel is one of my big hobbies. I'm a big homebody at the same time that I'm outside. So I'm
Mhm.
cooking, I'm inside watching a new show. I feel like, as corny as it is, I do relate to the I am just a girl TikTok. Like I truly
Mm.
am just a girl. I'm 23. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out what I like, what I don't like. So that is who I am a little bit behind the camera. I feel like I'm actually pretty just as relatable as my content is. I'm a relatable person, I would say, as well in certain aspects.
No, totally. And I think that's why you have over 100,000 followers is like,
Getting there,
because,
getting there.
yeah, no, because like people can relate with what exactly you're talking about. So A Bright Idea podcast is a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to find out their aha moments. And I just want to know, especially in this day and age, content creators and people with some of these like unconventional business ideas, they are entrepreneurs. And I think you guys are changing what it means to be an entrepreneur and making money. Do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I don't think I considered myself an entrepreneur until this September when my TikTok took a different direction. So, just a little background about me, I come from a family of entrepreneurship. So, my grandpa created the first Black and largest nations construction, real estate, and property management companies. So, I was born into this family where it's all about like, if you have a dream, you should complete that dream. And more
Mm.
importantly, you should make money while you're completing that dream. They go hand in hand. So now I consider myself an entrepreneur because I've been able to look at my TikTok. At first, before I blew up for reading print media, I actually just made travel content. I would sometimes make social commentary, get readies with me, very like the things you see on TikTok all of the time, which I still consume. And when I hit this huge following with print media, it became, yeah, of course, I want to be on this app and do this, but how can I make something bigger than just a face on TikTok? How can I really enlighten education? How can I make it entertaining? So that's when I think the entrepreneurial mindset that's always been in the back of my head, always been a value in my family, it kicked in. And suddenly I was calling my dad and my mom, like, okay, wait, I actually think I want to start a business with this. So
Mm.
now I consider myself an entrepreneur because I have a mission, I have values, and everything that I do, especially if it's monetarily oriented, it has to align to what that overall big vision is.
Totally. And I love that, like, social media is kind of the vessel for being able to grow as an entrepreneur and as a business. I want to take a step back. You talked a little bit about your grandfather's company. You are from Atlanta, right? Yes. And so I was reading a little bit about your grandfather's company. It's so dope. That was founded 70 years ago, and it specializes in construction, project management, and real estate development in the Atlanta area. So we need to like talk about that a little bit. Like, can you tell me a little bit about what it was like? Like listeners, some listeners that might hear this episode may know who your family is and may know your the company, but a lot of people don't know how influential your family's company is to the Atlanta area and just the history of Atlanta. Can you talk a little bit about that and growing up in such an entrepreneurial family?
Sure. So I always like to get the preface that I am the youngest of all of his grandkids. So I actually just got off a call with my cousins. Literally, we still do weekly, monthly calls to check in, and it's by generation. So we're G3s. So I just got off like our G3 call where we went over some of our goals for the year and for a couple years. So it's very integral in my life. Even though I am not a full-time employee of H.J. Russell and Company, it is still in my back of my mind. I'm still involved in it some way, shape, or form, day to day or week to week. But I would say growing up in it, it kind of it did a couple of things, right? So one, it provided me like a certain amount of privileged background, which I think that my parents very much were like, listen, one, you ain't make none of this money. You're like, this is somebody else's money that somebody else made. It's up to you to figure out how are you going to use a platform? How are you going to use the resources that you have to make the world a better place in the same way
Mm-hmm.
grandfather did. So I think from a young age, it's always like you are going to be a big person, not because of your grandpa, but because we expect you to be a person who will change people's lives, even if it's one person, two people. My parents kind of always had that instilled in me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when it came to my grandpa, I spent majority of my time with him having fun. Like my cousins, they were working for the company, they were doing things. I remember he was in the later part of his much later part of his career when I was growing up. So I would like ride around with him to different properties that he was managing. He would talk to the tenants that were living there. And that was something that from a very early age I was able to comprehend was that yes, he was owning and developing and managing properties, but he had this very personal relationship with everybody from the tenants to the people that were fixing the building to people that might be coming and fixing a window. So from a young age, I saw that an entrepreneurial mindset, especially one that will get you far, is about like these connections, right? It's
Yeah.
about me asking you questions. It's about you asking me questions about my life. So I would say early on, personal connections. Like you have to get to know people for who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it also was really cool, like growing up in a really big family as well. All of my cousins living in Atlanta, and family is a very like centric value to me. So I feel like it inspired a lot of things that I still do today. And I'm sure a bunch of other things that I can't even think of right now.
No, I love that. And one thing in just doing research on your family's company, I love to I had a guest on here a few months ago who talked about vertical integration within their company and having like a central business or a central focus of your business, but then having several other businesses that relate to the center business. So you're keeping all of the money in the family. And so I thought, in reading more about your family's company, the construction to the project management to the real estate development, it's all staying within the family and the community and just like the circulation of the black dollar. And so I love that. That was like really inspiring to me reading it. How do you believe that it shaped your experiences and like your relationship with entrepreneurship? Like you kind of like don't know anything different because you like grew up in it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking is that so this is what my parents told me from a young age. They were like, you can be anything you want to be in life, just aim to be the best at it. Like that
Yeah.
is what they told me, and also create it to be your own. So I think all I have known is that entrepreneurship is a path that I would eventually go down. I always saw whatever I did, there would be something I was doing on the side. That project, whether it's a full time role at a big corporate company, that might turn into me using those skills to build my own company. So I think in me, it's always been something. And I didn't even know it was entrepreneurship probably until like, I would say around 2012. I feel like I started hearing the word a lot more. And
Yep.
I think after honestly the recession we had, people changed their mindset of like, wait, how can I always make sure I'm making money that's not dependent on a company or on another person?
Mhm.
So when I heard of entrepreneurship, I was like, oh, this is really cool. It took me years to understand that that is what my grandpa did. To me, it was in my mind, I think, especially being younger, I always thought it was a family business. You have a dream that you want to complete and you build the business. So I think entrepreneurship has been almost a value that has been instilled in me. So there aren't moments that I um, don't think about creating my own, which is, I think, a very interesting mindset to have as a young Black person is that it's an expectation of you to create something on your own
Mm.
versus you are stepping outside of most people's comfort zone. I saw it as like something that you just do.
Mhm.
Which is really, you probably didn't, I didn't think about until you brought it to my attention right now.
Yeah. And so growing up, your parents were like, you can be anything, just be the best at whatever you want to be. So, like, when you were off high school, Kelsey, you were like, I'm going to go to college. Like, what was your dream? What were you going to be?
Oh my gosh, I went through so many things. I knew I wanted to help people. Like that's all I knew I wanted to do. So I went to school and I was like, I want to be a psychologist. Like I want to be a therapist. And I also was a little money oriented. So in my mind, I was like, okay, but I do need to figure out a way to maybe like prescribe medicine or be a
Yeah.
medicine. I was like, I want some money on too.
Yeah.
And like, a school counselor might not make as much money as the lifestyle that I know I want to live. So
Right.
I was like, okay, I want to be a psychologist. I was a psychology major, went to my second semester classes. I'll never forget. It was like some brain class. I'm notorious for being late to class with food. Like it's just me. Like I cannot help
What are you walking into class with, Kelsey? Chick-fil-A?
Okay, at the time it was Starbucks. It was Starbucks at the time, but no more of that right now. No more of that. It was Starbucks, absolutely. And you know, I had this mindset of like, if I'm late, I'm gonna be late. Like it is what it is. So it doesn't matter if I'm 2 minutes, 7 minutes. I've gotten better at that. So when I walked in, the professor was fully in the lesson. I was like, this is not a syllabus day at all.
Mhm.
Only a seat in the back. It was embarrassing trying to get in my seat. I say all this to say, can I curse on here?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
shit was not for me. I was like, I gotta find another major where like I can be a little later, where like the professor isn't giving me this glare because I'm late. And I think I had a sociology class the following day.
Mhm.
And I'm a Posse scholar, which is a scholarship that aims to create like change makers. They send you to school in groups of 10 and all these things. And we
Mhm.
have a mentor on campus. You meet with your mentor one on one biweekly. And my meeting with my mentor, who happened to have gone to Boston University as well and studied sociology. And I was telling him how much I hated psychology and what I really wanted to do in life. And he was like, that you want to be a sociologist. Like you want
Mhm.
to study people, you want to study society, you want to study why people interact with people because you're a Black woman. Like, why is it that I get treated differently in this hospital than someone who doesn't look like me? Like, what is that about?
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, maybe I should change my major. So I changed it. My parents like, what the hell are you gonna do with that? I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out. So I think I was pre-law at one point. It's like I want to be an education lawyer.
Mhm.
So it was always I wanted to help people. So I went and wanted to be a psychologist. I think at one point it changed to a plastic surgeon, an education lawyer. I wanted to help people. So like I think Kelsey going into college didn't even really know what Kelsey wanted to do.
Yeah.
She knew what she wanted life to look like and how she wanted to interact with people, which has never changed. I
Mm.
just think the position I occupied has changed. The position I think I want to occupy has changed drastically and does all the time.
Let's face it, starting a business is hard work, and building a website for a business, that's another story. Why not hire some help? 35th Street Builders are not just website builders, they're dreamers. With experience spanning in startups to enterprises, 35th Street Builders will provide you with the mobile app and web development skills to get your business up and running. At 35th Street Builders, they pride themselves on affordability, reliability, and compassion. Ready to take some work off your plate? You can schedule an intro call with 35th Street Builders by going to their website at 3sb.io. That's the number 3, the letter S, the letter B.io.
So you're in school and you're on TikTok and you said that you love to travel, you love like you're out in you're in these streets. And then I saw this TikTok, and I have to quote it because it was like one of my favorite things that you've ever said. But you were like, I wanted to be sexy and smart. I mean, I'm already sexy and I'm already smart, but I wanted to be both better. So,
Like, I was gonna say, like, that sounds like something I would say, like, yeah, you said it. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
like
you said it. What's the
please walk me through that. Like, was that the entry point to you picking up a newspaper and reading it on TikTok? Like,
I
what?
mean,
Take me on that. Take me on that journey.
I will take it's a journey, and it kind of starts with a date that I went on.
Okay.
Went on a date. This guy asked me, like, what is GDP? I
Mm,
knew what GDP was, but like, could I have explained it eloquently, like after a drink and a half, and I'm like a
mm,
little nervous? No. So I was like, yeah, kind of. And he took it upon, I was like, I'm just going to be coy. And he took it upon himself to explain it. I didn't like that. Like, I really didn't like that it was a term that I like knew, but didn't know how to explain.
right.
And people couldn't have a conversation about it. And I shut down because, like, as it happens a lot to us, when we don't know things, we become shameful and we like shut down.
Mm,
And that's a normal reaction that also I have really tried to help my audience know is one of the most humanistic things is like to know
mm,
something and to tense up, it's normal. Um, so that happened. And then months pass, it's summer, I'm out of classes, I'm literally just acting a fool. Like I'm quite acting a fool. And I was sitting a moment after my 23rd birthday reflecting like, holy shit, what have I even learned? Like I've been living in this new city that's like the cultural hub of our country. I'm a full year in grad school and I honestly couldn't tell you much that I have learned. So I realized that had to do with me. Like it was because I was not doing enough outside work besides going to class to like challenge my brain. And traditionally, I always ask for my birthday gifts after my birthday. Like, I never know what I want. And I asked my dad, hey, could I have a New York Times subscription? Because in college, he would always send me New York Times articles that reminded him of me
mm,
and spoke to what I was sharing with him. I was learning all of these things. I grew up reading the Atlanta Journal Constitution until I was like, until I was old enough to drive, pretty much driving myself to school. And it was this moment of like, wait, I am sexy. Like I've had a very sexy year here. Don't get me wrong. I've been out and out. Like I've
yeah.
done everything under the sun that I could think of that like a young 22 sexy-year-old person would do in New York. But I'm not as smart as I want to be. And I also like there was some other things going on. Like in my 23rd birthday, I also made a promise to myself to stop prioritizing the male gaze. I
Mm,
like for a long time, I was like, I'm gonna just stop dating, maybe take a break. But it was like the way I was prioritizing what men thought about me. And I
mhm,
was like, if I want men to think one thing about me, I want them to be like, this was the sexiest, smartest person I have ever talked to in my life. Like,
mhm.
and it's like, I wanna, like, just be smarter. So it did all lead to that, right? And
Yeah.
I going through, like, I wanna be 20, I wanna go into my later half dating better, smarter people, so I should become, like, a better, smarter person. So, yes, I did wanna be sexy and smarter, and it kinda was for that superficial reason that turned into this, like, beautiful thing.
No, I love that perspective of like you wanted you the way that you felt after that guy asked you what the GDP was. And you were like, I know it, but I can't explain it. Like, and then you talk a little bit about the male gaze and their perception. I want to get into that a little bit.
Do it.
So what did it feel like when he was explaining it to you? Like you couldn't explain it for yourself.
I felt, I wanted to call it mansplaining, but it wasn't because I actually didn't know what he was talking about. But
Yeah.
felt I felt very first I felt like angry and frustrated that this person is like doesn't think is explaining to me something that they think I do not know.
Mm, mhm.
But then with like the year and a half of therapy that I had had at that point, I know that like anytime you're angry, frustrated, it's another thing that's going on. So in reality, I was like sad and disappointed at myself that like at this age, I could not comprehend something that I had seen so many times in writing and reading and in movies. And I was sad at myself, you
Yeah.
know, and when you get sad, that's when you start to make very interesting decisions. Like you make very interesting decisions. So that's how I felt. I felt frustrated and angry. I think I also had a little pang, like twang of jealousy that this person like knew something that I didn't. Um,
Mhm.
and then it was sad. I was sad for
Do you
sure.
think that like we're also like so inundated with information every single day that like you know like you see it. It's not like you knew what it was like in your head, but being able to articulate it was a different thing. And I think like that's a perfect segue into your content where you are reading print media is like you actually take your viewer through like annotating the articles to have a better understanding of like what exactly that you're reading, which I think is so important.
Yes, it's so important. And it honestly, I tutored that same summer too.
Mhm.
Uh, only tutored for about like 3 months. And I did a lot of because it was the summer, all they had were like summer passages to read. And I remember something I used to struggle with a lot in standardized testing was like, you know, when they underline a word and they like
Mhm.
pick them for the word based off of like the sentence it's in, it requires you to read the whole entire paragraph and like circle the things you know, talk about the things you know. And suddenly when I was like doing the work before I would go tutor, it made sense to me. So I realized yes, GDP has a definition, but it's more important for us to be able to see GDP in an article and understand how that relates to a country that might be going through war, a
Mhm.
country who might be having a lack of women going to school, a lack of like sanitary pads and tampons. Like that is when you really get to connect dots. And that's more important than being able to spit out what GDP is in the moment.
Right. So what was the aha moment that led you to put your camera up and recording yourself reading the newspaper?
Okay. I have been doing like, you know, I had been kind of like putting my camera in front of me every day. So it to me, I was in a brain fog of like, listen, I've always wanted to be like in front of a camera my whole life. Like that is something from a young age. Even when I told you I wanted to be a psychiatrist, like I wanted to be like Dr. Phil. Like, you know, when I wanted to be a
Yeah.
plastic surgeon, I wanted to be like Dr. Miami. Like I wanted to do something for good, whether you find that good or not, and put it on camera so people.
Mhm.
So I was and like I had a TikTok go viral a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna make TikToks every day and see what happened. So for me, I kind of knew what videos did better. And when I did social commentary, when I would talk about those sticky topics like race, class, gender, the economy, they would blow up because I would do it in like a super funny, sarcastic way.
Mhm.
Like, you know what? It probably would make sense for me to like I said, I literally want to share with you all what I learn every day. I had an idea it would do well, not as well as it's done. So it felt natural to do. And I love learning with people. Like I think that's the most fun way to learn. So kind of just
When
made
when did you realize that like you had found it? Like you had found your niche. Like people were starting to reach out to you, you were getting attention. Like when was that?
I mean, I have to say it was when that video, like it blew up. How am I going to expect you all to be media literate if I don't teach you how to write an essay? If I don't share with you my foolproof way to write an analytical essay, what are we doing? What are we doing? Y'all know when your English teacher is like, analyze these sources and you're like, what the fuck? What does that mean? I'm literally gonna show you how to do it with 3 different newspapers. We're gonna use the front page of 3 different newspapers. I didn't come to this foolproof method on my own. Shout out my 3rd grade teachers, Miss Pryles. Shout out my 10th grade English teacher, Miss Johnson, who taught me you can write about anything you wanna write about, which is the reason I wrote my 10th grade research paper on Coco Chanel. But it's not because of the views. It's because of like the internal work I was doing, right? It was this moment of also like, I also picked up the paper because that has like been the most anxious summer of my life that I ever had.
Mhm.
And um in a moment I had like panic attacks for the first time. I had never dealt with panic attacks, anything like that. And I share that because my therapist recommended you need to find sources of happiness that like of course she made me find this fucking answer. She didn't just give it to me. Like months of finding. Like but she was like you
I
have
need you to deep search.
yeah, I'm like, I will say I do have friends who have therapists and they give them the answer. And I'm like, I'm kind of jealous, but that's why she's a good therapist. She makes
Yeah.
you fun.
Yeah.
Um, it's like you have got to find things that bring you happiness that have nothing to do with others. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't know. But she was like, "Well, why don't you tap into things that made you happy when you were like 4, 5, 6?" Like, that's before you really had the brain to even understand what other people wanted. And I thought back to being in the library and I used to love thesauruses. Like, I would sit in the library hour and just like read a bunch of random facts. So
Mhm.
in that, that also was the other reason I asked for the newspaper was like, I want to know random things again, like I used to. And I think because I was doing all of this internal work, like I know I have an audience, I was struggling connecting with them for those couple of months because everything I did felt so fake and
Yeah.
manufactured. So it was like doing all of this internal work, knowing I've always wanted to be like a leader in education, somehow in entertainment, and seeing that go viral. I was like, oh, holy shit, this is it. Like, I've done the work for myself. I believe in this. It's true to me. So it made it easy because every day I love doing what I do. Like, I literally get so much joy. It makes me smile to read, to share with my audience. So I knew it was that moment because I had done work within myself and I knew okay, I can actually use my platform for something helpful. And I don't have to overshare on the things that are bringing me anxiety, like the getting readies with me, like the vlogging, the trips. So I think internally, I just knew this is it. This is
I
it.
love that. I love that. It sounds like too your therapist taught you how to tap into your inner child.
Yes. Hmm.
And it's so funny because I talk to my friends about this too, and like as an adult, when we're feeling anxious or we're feeling lonely, we do. I think you alluded to this earlier. Like we do some crazy shit, and like I had a moment like that a few years ago where I would be like, okay, I feel lonely, so I'm going to go out and drink with my friends, or I'm going to go retail therapy and like shop. But like really, tapping into your inner child could be like when you were a little kid reading thesauruses just for the hell of it, or like leisurely learning something so random, but it makes you happy. And so oh my God, I'm so happy that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's like, and now, of course, like I love a drink, I love a dinner, I love to shop, but it's a different level of like satisfaction and like natural serotonin when
Mhm.
the restaurant that I recommended I read in the New York Times, or
Mm.
when like the new boutique that I've been wanting to go to, I found in this super niche magazine because it's like, oh, these are actual natural connections. So it's also like we all have to give ourselves grace. Like it's normal to want to have a drink, like when you're a little
Yeah.
stressed, normal to like want those interactions, but it's that moment where you're realizing you're doing it out of sadness, out of anxiety, where it's like, this is one of those things that can form to be a really life debilitating habit
Yeah.
uh, quickly. And it's like in your 20s that you have to be so aware, but yet still having fun to catch those habits. It's really a weird time, really weird time.
And it's so cool that you discovered something that was originally for yourself, but now you're helping so many people. Like once you started realizing people started noticing you and also going out and buying their own print media, like what was the need that you were trying to fill by reading the newspaper online? Like once you started getting attention from other people.
I feel like the need is like I'm kind of looking at my vision board right now, and I'm like, there's a lack of someone in media for youth. Like there is just this lack thereof. So the more that I dove into this journey, the more I was like, oh, who I was like, I started just learning more. I was like, who is the person that if I'm 6 years old, if I'm 12 years old, if I'm 19 years old, if I'm 23 years old, I can turn on my TV, I can go on my computer, I can go on TikTok and I can see them. And that person is encouraging me to learn. They're not encouraging me to be right. They're not encouraging me to believe in a certain subset of views.
Mm.
They're encouraging me to use my brain. And when we were little, like we had PBS, we had Sesame Street. And I even would argue, like, as a 23-year-old, we still got like a little bit of that, even with like Teen Nick, with like ABC Family.
Oh, you're throwing it way back. Yes.
But now it's like you see this also like generation of like young people, and I see older generations like they're growing up too fast. Well, goddamn, you don't give them anything, you don't create anything for them to have. And
Mm.
these like, really pivotal, like preteen, teenage, young adult moments
Yep.
think for me, it was that intergenerational aspect. As I saw that there were like high schoolers on the same TikTok as this one follower I have, Jacqueline, who's literally in her 70s. She comments on every single one of my videos, and I love her.
Yeah.
She and a 17-year-old are commenting on the same TikTok video on the platform that everybody in the ages between them is talking about how bad it is. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, let's like redefine what young people want media to be. So it also was like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to be like a youth advocate for all of these other little holes that need to be filled. So I think when I saw the intergenerational aspect and also realizing I was providing a safe space for learning that a lot of young people don't feel like they have right now for a lot of reasons. That's when I was like, I'm gonna keep doing this for sure.
And I think that there's a common misconception that young people don't listen or watch news at all. And that's not correct. Like, if you look at any of the polls, like in any election, like the young people are coming out, like the young people, I'm young, I'm 29. I'm going to consider myself young. Okay. So young people, we do listen and watch news. It's just in different ways than traditional. And as a segue, or kind of like piggybacking off of that, I found a statistic that I want to read that kind of relates to what we're talking about right now. But according to a 2022 survey conducted by the Media Insights Projects, they conducted a survey on the news consumption habits of 16 to 40-year-olds. And they found that 79% of Gen Zs and millennials get their news daily, but on several platforms. And 44% of Gen Z reported never receiving news and information from traditional sources, compared with 45% of younger millennials and 31% of older millennials. So, what it's saying here is that Gen Z and millennials do consume news daily, but on online platforms. So while there's several benefits to using online platforms to consume news, in your experience, what have been some major downfalls to only consuming news through online platforms?
I feel like the most common said answer is misinformation, but I would argue it's lack of in-person dialogue.
Mm,
Like, you know, misinformation has always been out there. Like, have you ever talked to somebody who's like in their 50s or 60s about like civil rights leaders or about like anything that happened like during their time period? Like, it's completely different from sometimes what actually happened. I say
mm,
that to say what's missing is when you get it from online, all you do is you're online, and that's not good for your mental health. It's not good to be texting your friends, giggles, giggles, swipe to your next platform, you're watching genocide, and
yeah.
then the next platform, you're making like a lip syncing video. It's not good because it's whoa. Like just in that 10 minutes, that is a lot for your brain to comprehend.
Mm,
Emotionally, your serotonin levels are going absolutely crazy. And that's why we end up going to bed feeling anxious, go to bed feeling depressed.
mhm,
Um, and I say the biggest thing is that a lot to alleviate that is to talk to people. You might have read it online, but how cool would it be to like send it to your friend and instead of like direct messaging them, FaceTime them and be like, can you believe like this is in this news source?
mm,
Or actually going to public spaces. And I know this sounds really crazy, but people did used to talk to strangers. Like they did see people reading something like, oh, what do you think of that?
yeah.
So I always say, if you want to get online, that's fine. Bring it in person. Send the article to like your aunt and call her, who you probably been meaning to call, and be
Mm,
like, what do you think about this? And who knows, she might give you a whole different perspective you didn't think of. However, online causes us to have echo chambers. We choose who we want to follow. We choose the media who we want to see, which completely disregards the media we don't. And that's just as important. Um,
mhm.
but it's only important if you bring it to in-person dialogue where you can share how you feel, where the other person can share how you feel. And y'all will both realize you don't know shit. And
Yeah.
that's okay because that's sometimes how life goes is you don't know everything. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say the biggest problem is.
So, in your experience, how has reading traditional media, like, how do you think that it has been better for you than reading just solely on online platforms?
Yeah. So It has increased my mental health drastically, like in
Hmm.
ways I would not imagine. Is the news is bad. Like there's a lot of bad shit going on in the world right now. Absolutely. However, what it has allowed me is to create a schedule of when I choose to consume news. So I tend to do it at night. Like that's when I read my newspaper. I lie like I read it in the morning, but I read it at night before I make my TikToks. And that is my time to consume what is going on in the world. It's an hour and a half of where I sit down, I read all of the newspapers that I have, get through articles that interest me, and then I save an hour afterwards to do what I need to do for myself. Like
Mm.
if I just read some devastating things, best believe I will be having a glass of wine and watching like my wind down show, which is Jersey Shore right now. If it made me really happy, I might not like need to do all that. I might just FaceTime a friend afterwards. I might go to bed if I'm feeling good.
Mhm.
I was reading news on my phone. I did not have the opportunity to do that because it's like I'm scrolling on Instagram and naturally, social media is a drug. So the way that it's created is to keep you on the app. So it's almost if you don't have a choice for your thumb to keep scrolling. You have to like make a conscious choice
Yep.
to get off social media. That's almost harder for your brain than to get on it. Like it's integrated into most of our schedules of when we get on it, when we don't. So I didn't have that time. So I would consume something that was like, oh my God, on the train, whether it's, getting in the Uber to go wherever I'm going. And what that would do was it would cause like a build up of anxiety about the world so much to where I would choose to not read about what was going on because it
Mm.
made me feel better. Then I got into that cycle of I feel like I don't know anything, trying to over consume information on my phone. So it's better for me because yes, the news is emotional. You should feel sad, happy, mad. All of those things should come about when you're reading the news. But if you don't have anything to do with those emotions, that's when it starts affecting you internally as a person and then affecting your outward actions. Much better for my mental health. And I am able to strike up a lot more conversation with people because
Mm.
like I'll be reading a news article. There's things in the news I would never ever read on my phone. Like I would never read that because
Like
one,
what?
the algorithm wouldn't give it to me.
Mhm.
And two, it didn't pique my natural interest. But in the newspaper, it might be something as simple as the author has my same last name as me. It might be that when I'm skimming the article, I see it's like, oh, I don't know, like my best friend lives in Chicago. So anytime I see something in Chicago, I read about Chicago because my one of my closest friends lives there. So it just makes me way more curious. My mental health is better, and I can have way more conversations with the most random people of all time.
That's so interesting. What is an article that you read in a newspaper or any like print media publication that you would have never scrolled on or stopped your scroll on your phone?
That is a great question. Honestly, I'm going to be honest, anything that really had to do with international news. Like I cannot tell a lie, a lot of international conflicts, I would get overwhelmed of like, do I actually know anything about this? How do I deal with it? I want to give you like a specific example that I have had though. Um honestly, recently a video I just did on some crises going on in Ecuador, I probably wouldn't have read about that in all honesty, like if I was reading on my phone, because in my day to day life, the people I'm talking to, they're not talking about South America. They're not talking about Ecuador. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't really concern me. But when I saw it in the paper, it was the title that caught my eye and them talking about it being a drug crisis. And I thought to myself, I was like, I just read an article about Ecuador like 3 months ago. And this title doesn't sit right with me. So I read it. And what I do after I read is I typically go on YouTube and
Uh-huh.
I'll find videos that will debrief what is going on in the country and I'll read comments. I try to find comments from people who are like actually from Ecuador. I'll go on subreddits. And when they were describing it, it was completely different from the article and the way it was being portrayed. So
Mm.
that's an article I never would have read. And I would have never known about like how a peace agreement between Ecuador and Colombia years ago left this drug route completely wiped out in a vacuum for power. So now you have all of these other countries, groups trying to maintain and get control of that drug route. Crazy, but like I would have not known about that, nor would I have known the majority of Ecuadorians still feel safe where they are. It's
Yeah.
only in specific areas. So a random article that like I would have never known anything about. But
Yeah.
now, like I go to this Ecuadorian restaurant by where I get my lashes done. And now like when I go back, I'm about to ask them, like, what y'all think?
Yeah.
What's going on? I will well, I'm like, what do you think?
Now
You know?
you want to know the culture. No, but seriously, I was going to ask you too. I'm like, does that help you because you're reading print and you're reading from journalists and these stories have been vetted and you're hoping that it's like nonpartisan, that you it helps you distinguish which part is misinformation and which part is real?
Oh, absolutely, like absolutely. And also like a lot of the things I read from are from the New York Times. Love them.
Yeah.
They are supported by other corporations, right? They are
Yeah.
not, they're not a full independent news source.
Uh-huh.
So I do, like I tell people, do with that what you please. But what I will say is that any if you want the real deal, you need to figure out what the people who are living there are dealing with. What do they think are the main concerns? So
Mhm.
I feel like what it has given me is I always need diverse sources. Like, yes, this is a newspaper, but kind of like I told you, I go to YouTube, I find independent channels that are going to debrief the issue. Reddit, I think Reddit has some of the most interesting information ever. Is it always true? I don't know. But I think
Yeah.
that what it's taught me is that the most important thing about misinformation is continuously questioning why you're reading what you're reading. Why did the people write this? Like, what is the New York Times interest in writing about the crisis of drugs that Ecuador is having?
Yeah.
What do they gain from what do they gain from portraying it as very violent, maybe more violent than it is? And when you start to ask yourself those questions, you'll probably end up being, oh, well, let me figure out the history behind this drug trade. Oh, well, let me see if I can go on Reddit and see people who live in this city in Ecuador, what they think. And you might find out. So I think it's made me question why, like I tell people, why the hell are you reading what you're reading? Is the
Right.
most important thing to ask yourself when you're reading.
So, with the partnerships that I mean, do you have partnerships with these publications or they just send you free
They just send me
stuff?
for free. I have not to this day read a newspaper or a print media source on my TikTok for payment.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah.
Because I also want to know, so not every newspaper or news organization gets it right. And so as you had just mentioned with the New York Times, like they're owned by a bigger conglomerate, they're not going to get it right all the time. Are you I mean, you could do whatever you want, I guess. But
Mm.
are you open about that on your TikTok about some of these missteps or like, you know?
That's a good question. And I feel like it goes back to the entrepreneurial, right? Like gratefully, right? My grandpa started his business in like the 1940s, 50s. So like I have been able to see the mistakes he made, the mistakes my dad made, his siblings made, and how they have affected them forever, sometimes in business, right? So I'm very strategic about how I talk about a source being wrong.
Mhm.
I do that by giving my audience a toolkit of questions that they can ask more
Okay.
so than because in my mindset is if I go on and blast Washington Post, New York Times on my TikTok, all it will do will most likely get people angry and garner an audience of people who did not like the New York Times anyway, right? Like
Mhm.
people who are reading the New York Times, they still gonna read the New York Times. It doesn't matter what I say. But as a creator, I feel like it's smarter to give people the critical questions of like, when you read a news source, you should like go online and look at the history of that news source. You should ask, why is this article on the front page of the New York Times? But when I'm opening YouTube, there's something completely different that's trending. Those are critical questions that honestly, oftentimes do not have a direct answer that are
Mm.
powerful and more enlightening for like a generation to have than somebody who is angry and going to go online. And we're Black women too, so that's a whole other thing about like if
Yeah.
I go bash somebody, I might lose potential partnerships that I didn't even know were brewing. So
Mhm.
it's also like I just think it's important for people to think critically, and that's what I want them to do. I don't want them to not interact with the source because it makes them mad. I want you to think about why does that make you mad?
So, in thinking critically, I just want to hear from your perspective. So when you read a newspaper, because you said you read international news, you read local papers, you're reading it all.
Yeah.
So let's say you are reading a newspaper, a local newspaper from like Des Moines, Iowa, for
Okay, cool.
example. Do you feel that there is writing that includes people of underserved communities? And when you open up this newspaper, can you get a sense of the culture of the community based on what you're reading cover to cover?
Yes. Honestly, local newspapers to me are much easier sometimes to find out where they might lean politically.
Mm,
Um, for example, a lot of local newspapers will talk about issues that big city folks might find trivial, but they are extremely important to this community, right? So let's say the example is this small town wants to change the color of the stoplights on during Pride Month, right?
mhm,
Like if the voices are leaning a little bit more like, okay, this has to do with a national agenda. This is trying to promote homosexuality. I can tell that that leans more right because of what the right is dealing with right now. Like how
yeah.
they are framing issues is that it's a fight against like national identity compared to if they talk about the issue in like this intellectual way and they're like bringing all of these statistics about like DE and I and how, the queer community has been even like language, right? Like using queer versus like homosexuals. People are still using like these different terms in newspapers.
Mhm,
If I'm seeing more something like this is representation for the queer community and statistics, the left loves to use statistics. Like they love to use certain words, buzzwords, what you call them. So
yeah.
then I can tell, like, okay, either the writers or the people they're interviewing might lean more left. So I can tell sometimes by the language that's being used how issues are being talked about. But unfortunately, what the newspaper doesn't really do is say that this person we interviewed is Black or this person that we interviewed is queer,
Mm,
which I think is a benefit and not. So to answer your question, yes. And then sometimes no. But we
okay.
also know historically marginalized groups don't get interviewed that much, aren't in rooms of journalism that much. So they're not writing the stories as much. So it kind of goes into that history as well.
That is interesting because when you do read a newspaper, they're never going to say, I mean, not never, but they don't usually say that the person that we interviewed is Black. I think that that's easier to do if it's a news story on TV.
Truly.
But so do you think that, like, how do you think that changes your perception of like the things that you read?
That's a great question. Honestly, I can't lie. Ever since reading print media, I have thought about race completely differently than I did ever.
How?
I have realized it is extremely important, but in many ways, it is the most divisive thing amongst us ever.
Yeah.
Like, it is critical to talk about. It is so important that, like, us as Black women are on this platform. It's important because there are not platforms that are showcasing Black female entrepreneurs. But also, in the same breath, it kind of like, many of the issues that we talk about are racial or socioeconomically driven. Like it's money driven. I've seen it in the neighborhood become such a grab for a story that like this Black gentrified neighbor, this Black historic neighborhood in this community is being over because the Black people did not have access to deeds and we haven't used deeds. Like we were like, this is your house. So this is your house, and now it's being overridden by these developers that are these white developers that are coming in and going to make a new town center when the basis of the story should actually be about poverty. Like it as much as it is about race, and it's important that culturally we examine why Black people did not use deeds as much as white folks. That's a whole different conversation. But ultimately, we're talking about an impoverished community that does not have the finances to refurbish the communities. So developers are looking at it like, oop, money grab. It's all about money.
And that happens all over the world, race or not.
Exactly. So like
Yeah.
when so the more I read the paper and the more I'm like, oh, this as much to do with my black ass as I thought it did. It actually has
Yeah.
to do with everybody's ass. Like it has to do with all of, all of these
Yeah.
countries in the world where there are communities that do not have enough and are asking for a voice, begging for it. And people who have it will not voluntarily give them space. They just take their things away. So that is what it's like. It honestly has been like a philosophical revelation of like, oh my God, like I've always known it's about money, but once we actually see it more about money, about a lack of democracy, then it's like, oh shit, there's actually work that we have to do. And it doesn't have to do as much with D, E, and I. It's way bigger than that. But I
Do
see
you
you.
think that it's a distraction when they include that? Or do you think that's a loaded question?
That's a loaded question. I think that if you are not equipped with critical thinking skills, it can be distracting. I don't think that I would like to think that no, I actually do think they're trying to distract us. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about a sociological theory class I was just taking and like how we can really weaponize intelligence. And I do think that many people, especially in this country, know that we have one of the shittiest education systems ever. And we have an education system that does not value critical thinking. There are many public education systems that do. We don't. So I think that people in this country who have money and who are in big positions know that there is a large mass of people that do not have the critical thinking skills or really confidence or network to ask, why are we talking so much about race? Like, what is the why behind that? And they know most people are going to be like, well, because it's what is popular right now, or it's what's needed. It's not what's needed. So I think that some people know it's distracting. I think some people may not and just realize it's distracting enough for me to make money right now. But I think unfortunately it becomes at the expense of most people to where they are almost forced to see it as important rather than like, do I actually want to find this important right now? That
Do
was a
you
really large answer. We have intellectualized identities so much, whether that's race, gender, sexuality, class. We have intellectualized them so much that it allows for humans to center themselves much more than they need to in problems.
hmm.
What I say by that, it is honestly one of the most incredible things that I think our generation has actually created language around sexuality. It has helped in terms of the way we talk about sexual relationships, period. Like the language is so powerful. The fact that we even have it's incredible what we've done. But in the same, it's incredible that like Afro Latina exists, right? For
Mhm.
someone to be like, oh my gosh, I have this Latino history, I have this Black history. This is why I'm having this very unique experience. However, what categories do is they keep you away from other people, right? Like, I mean, it would be because of how much we intellectualize identities, it will be hard for me to think about running into a white, straight, rich woman on the street and becoming friends with her. When probably like, no, I don't want to say too many years before, but like maybe even 15 years ago, I wouldn't even have the language to say that,
No,
right?
you
Like
would yeah.
I wouldn't. It's crazy that I probably would see, I would know if I saw like, let's say if I see somebody who is white, male, and identifies themselves as queer, suddenly I'm like, oh, we probably would have more in common. That's kind of crazy to think about based off identities. I don't know anything about this person's values. I haven't even tried to see if we have shared experiences, but because there's something about the queer community and Black community that is rooted in a collective struggle, I think that we are going to be cool. That is kind of crazy. Because in all
Yeah.
honesty, you should actually be making friends and networks based on shared experiences. Like that's what we should, right? Like, who knows? That white rich person that might have like 10 times more money than you all could have traveled to the same place last year. You just
Yeah.
wouldn't know unless you talk to them. So I think that we would not be further along as a race. I think we would be further along as a society. I think we would be a more peaceful society if we didn't focus so much on the identity labels that make us feel like we're having the struggle we have and realize that it is systems that are run by individuals that have a shared knowledge and shared experiences that are running things. Like
Yeah.
I think that we would just be more peaceful and we'd be more open to meeting with people who maybe we think we have no relation to because of an identity. Um,
Yep.
that's what I think. I think it's much bigger than race. I think unfortunately as Black people though, we kind of we almost center it too much. But
Mhm.
Blackness is the littest thing. I like, at the same time, I'm like, it's everything.
Yeah, it
But it can
is everything.
be nothing too, you know?
No, it is everything. And I think it is a very unique experience. And it wasn't until very recently that I started like really looking at it in this way. But when I was growing up, I'm from Pittsburgh. I grew up in a very diverse
Yeah.
neighborhood. And I come from a family that would be, if we're talking about socioeconomic class, upper middle class.
Yeah.
And so my friends were like, I had never looked at a white person and like, oh, they have more money than me. Oh, they're more educated than me. Like, my parents have money. I was very educated. I traveled a lot. If I needed something, they could help me out. Like, I never looked at it like that. But then as I got older, and I think also the prior administration that we had, everything just became super divisive. So I
It,
feel like as I've gotten older, there's no way I would like, not no way, but like I'm less likely to see a rich white woman on the street and be like, oh, she could be my really good friend because I'm like, but I'm Black. Like, like say, and I feel like sometimes I can only speak from the Black experience. We do latch on to this like struggle sometimes, or like you can only be with Black people, you can only date Black people, you can only like, associate in these groups. And it actually does hold us back. Like if you look at any business, like businesses that do really well are diverse. And we're not just talking about Black and white, we're talking about just across the board of backgrounds and like
absolutely.
life experiences. And so I feel like in my own life, sometimes the reasons that I've achieved things or gotten further in life is because I had friends from all sorts of backgrounds rather than trying to be in my own little bubble. I don't know. That's like long winded, but
No,
that's just how I feel.
it makes complete sense. And it's actually, I was just recently on a podcast, and one of the pre-interview questions they asked me was, do you have any non-Black friends? And I was like, oh, I was like, this is such an interesting question. And if I was having a podcast, I would never ask a guest this question, but not my podcast. And like, I would do that, because to me, that's just a question that's asking for division. Like,
Yep.
you know, um, and and I was like, I have actually like a Puerto Rican friend. And they were like, oh, he's a man. I was like, yeah, he's also gay. They're like, what about like a white woman? Would you be friends with a white woman? And I was
Mm.
like, off the top of my head, like I can't think of any, but I actually do have like two white girlfriends that I actually do see often. And it made me think, I'm so happy that I have them for many different reasons. Like, as much as I love being Black, I love hanging out with them because I don't have to even think about being Black. Like,
Mm.
if there are moments that come up and I'm like, well, you know what? It's time to take my Black ass back home.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
it's time to take ass back home. But I have moments with them where I'm like, it's actually refreshing to like be around people that I genuinely have shared interests with, shared values, and we don't listen to the same music. We don't have the same cultural icons. You actually don't know that my hair looks a mess right now. Like you have no clue. We
Ah, yes.
no, I
That's
did
so
not know.
real.
No, literally, like you didn't even know that, like, yeah, you took me to a spot of town I would have never gone to.
Mhm.
And those are like what we should be craving in life, are more unique experiences based in shared value
Mm.
versus experiences with people just because they're Black. Because I tell young Black women, if you just try to make friends with everybody because they're Black, your Black ass is gonna get your feelings hurt. Cause like not everybody is cool. Like,
No, but that's the thing too. It's like, but yeah, we're all Black, but like being Black is not a monolith. Like I know some really not cool Black people. Okay, like this is
really bad.
like, and
Really bad.
just because we're skin folk don't mean we're kin folk. Like seriously, like that's not it. Like
I
like
call them RBBs, real bad Blacks.
yes, and
Like, they're
there's
real
tons
bad.
of them.
Like,
Yeah, there's tons
yeah.
of them. Do you teach your audience? I know that we kind of went on this tangent, but do you teach your audience how to see stories from a different perspective
Oh,
when it
that's a
comes
great
to like annotating
question.
articles and things?
Um, I think that it goes to that same answer of the toolkit, right? Like, that's a great question, Amber. Do I try to I don't think I do that consciously or on purpose as much. And I should find a way to like do that more consciously. Um, I think about I don't that's a great question. And I want to answer this thoroughly in like a complete sentence because I have not answered it in a complete sentence. Um, I think it's by those same questions. Why are you reading what you're reading? It encourages you to look at the viewpoint of the company. Why did this person write the article? Why are they interviewing the people they're interviewing? I feel like I do that by pushing people to ask why. And I also stand on like all I kind of have is my perspective.
Mm.
So I always try to lean in with personal anecdotes, maybe of why something stood out to me, why this matters to me, sharing a funny story of like why I view this the way I view it. Um, but I don't think I consciously do that. I want people to really actually that's something that I really encourage Gen Z to stop. Like you
Mhm.
don't have to be empathetic all the time towards the person who has a different identity than you. Like you know, I feel like Gen Z is a generation of over empathy. Like
Yeah.
you're, you know, somebody I think it's just funny. I don't know if it's the office scene or some funny thing where like this person's like, oh, that person's a midget. I know that word is not okay sometimes. And like, no, that's a little person. You have to call them a little person. Person's like, actually, I'm so okay with being called a midget. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it was some mockumentary. But to say, why don't you ask people more so what they need, what they want to accomplish, and then go about it?
Mhm.
Not everybody's perspective is yours to empathize with, more so just hear and listen to sometimes. So
Yeah.
that is what I would say to that question.
No, I love it. And just in addition to teaching media literacy to people or encouraging media literacy to your viewers, and then also like teaching them to look at things in a different perspective, do
Sure.
you also understand how you're contributing financially to meet the print media?
I do. And I think they probably will keep those statistics to themselves. Unless I don't even know how to ask. Like, whatever.
No, I want to know. No, that's a good question though. Like, how many people have gone out? Because I'm one of them. I watched you, and
Yeah.
I went out, and I have a subscription now to the Washington Post.
No, I actually, I have no clue how it has financially impacted them. I'm sure positively for sure. Um, and I have no clue, especially because my goal is to get people to pick up more print media versus like this specific newspaper, this specific magazine. That's part of my like goal is pick up what speaks to you. Like
Hmm.
also that's how you learn. Like a part of learning is self-interest. So if a magazine looks cool, you should read that. Like
Yeah.
find out that it has nothing interesting inside, but you know, maybe Washington Post, maybe you're like close to DC, so you pick up, be a little self-interested, do it out of vanity a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
but I only imagine it's a positive impact.
No, I definitely think it's positive in the way that you just described, but also just in the industry as a whole. So I work for a news station. I have for now for like 10 years, and like one of the things that I think that we're really struggling is the financial piece. And that all goes back to how you tell your stories, because when you are, for example, I asked you earlier, when you're reading an article, can you tell the voice, or can you tell if they're actually giving you a clear idea of the community that you're reading? A
Oh yeah.
lot of the times we fail in the media, in the industry, is because there's like labor shortages, there's not enough editors, there's not enough reporters, there's not enough like diverse voices, and that all comes down to funding. And
Yeah.
so by you encouraging people to go out and buy print media, it is helping to keep print media around and to be better.
Yeah, and that I'm really happy you said that because when I thought about financially, like the first thing that came to mind was revenue. And as soon as you started speaking, I was like, I mean, personally, I could care less about the Washington Post revenue. Like they're gonna do
Sure.
what they're gonna do. But what I do care about is the editor that doesn't know if they're going to have a job in 4 months
Mm,
because the fashion section isn't doing as well as it used to.
yeah.
It's about the like lawyers who like literally are losing clients because local journalism is dying and the people they're representing don't exist anymore.
Mm,
It's about like the cleaning company that has to come to your like office to clean it all the time. Those are the financial incentive, like the financial gains that I hope to be making for industries. So I'm really happy you said that because I think Gen Z has to understand print media is not dead. It doesn't need to be reinvested, revived. One of my audience members taught me this. We have to buy it. All like that's all print media still exists. All you have to do is buy it. That's the
yeah.
solution.
Money
So
is power. Money, like,
literally
yes.
power. And I'm like, that's the thing. Like, get it. Like, I kind of want to tell my generation, get out your head. Like, yes, it's a lot to do, but a lot of it has to do with how you spend your money. Like, a lot of us aren't buying Starbucks. Do you know how far $5 can get you? Like, I have $5 of like local, like 5 local newspapers. I got them for like 5.79. Like, a venti, a tall, a grande can be a learning opportunity instead. So
Mhm.
I hope Gen Z knows we have so much more power than we think with our buying power, especially because they know we're not good with money. Like, we'll buy anything. So, this is your time to be buying something you actually want to see exist in the future.
So going back to the content that you're creating. So I am predicting that 2024 is going to be a really big year for you,
Yeah.
content wise, because we are in an election cycle.
Yes.
So like what can people get from newspapers and what can people learn? I guess what are you creating for 2024 that people can get that will talk about the election or help them decide on the election?
Absolutely. That is a great question. I feel like people can expect from my page to learn alongside with me. Like as somebody who has been a voter for 5 years, who has not always done their best job voting in local elections, who has not always done their best job knowing the candidates. I
Mm,
am making a promise to my audience this year to learn with me alongside. Like, and not so much about what my views of the candidates are, but more so what like I just did one on the Iowa caucus. I did not know what the Iowa caucus is. I have known about the name forever in my time. Well, like let's actually get into like what is a midterm election? Like what is a local election? What is the difference between local, state, federal? Like what are we doing here? What does it mean that this person is being appointed to this seat?
mm,
What does it actually mean that you're voting for somebody on your school board? Like what is their position?
yeah.
So I can promise they're going to learn from me about the process of elections more so than the views of the candidates because I think everybody should have the ability to choose who they want to choose. That's what democracy is.
Yeah.
Uh, and I also think that they can expect a ask of being a young person to be involved in politics and policy. Like actually do shit. Like, you know what I mean? What I mean
Yeah.
by that, like ask questions in class. Ask your classmates who they're voting for. If they're not voting, ask them why they're not voting. And if the conversation becomes so frustrating, leave it there. Like that's sometimes what politics is. Challenge your teachers. Like if you have a teacher that's like, what do y'all want to talk about? Tell them you want to talk about the election.
Mm.
Talk to your parents. Talk to people who are older than you, who are of a different race. See what they're thinking. That's what I want my audience to expect from me this year. And also like hopefully a lot more in-person reporting and actually talking to folks. So that's what I would hope people can
Wait, you're getting outside?
I'm
Are
gonna get
you
outside,
you're
girl.
hitting the streets?
I'm hitting the streets. I have some things in the works that I can't fully talk
Ooh,
about, but I
okay.
will be hitting the streets soon. And just ask people why. Like this is the election year of why. We
Yeah.
should be asking why do we want the candidates we want? Why does our electoral system look the way it does? And most importantly, do we want it to change? And if
Mhm.
we do, then we can talk. If we don't have to talk. But the why, and also for a younger generation to realize this isn't the only election. They keep happening.
Yeah,
You
speak
know,
on it. But also not just national, but local.
internationally.
Internationally, locally as well. How do these newspapers encourage people to pay attention to the local and regional elections?
Do they? Like, I feel like they don't
They
really.
don't?
It'll be a small, to me, it'll be like a small one off on the national section about like a race that's going on in, I don't know, Georgia. But if the city, for example, like Georgia has a lot of spotlight on it right now because of
Right.
also like in a lot of hip hop media because of Thug. Like it's a lot going on in that state, in the city of Atlanta itself. So they're getting attention. But what about like the North Carolinas or like the West Virginias? Like there's not so much happening in the state or in major cities there to draw media attention. Um, so I would say it's kind of sad what's going on locally. Pretty much.
So how are
I
you finding your information locally?
um so like what I do honestly is I when I read, I have like an annotation system. And if I don't know, like let's say that I'm reading, I'm gonna make something up. Like I'm gonna go back to the gentrification article. Like, there actually did read one in Dallas like a couple months ago. And let's say I'm figuring out, okay, Dallas, they're having like a gentrification crisis going on right now in this neighborhood. Let me go and like see what also elections are going on in Dallas. Like I circle all of the names in articles. And if I see that there's like a politician, I'll look them up. Let me see if like they are running. Let me see if their election is coming up. And while I might not talk about it on my TikTok, those are ways that I'm keeping myself educated. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, the city's being talked about, a politician was mentioned. Let me see what they stand for. Let me see if their position is about to open. Go from there. Um, and also there are a lot of young people in politics that are very active on Instagram. That's
Okay.
interesting to follow. I can
Oh, I was going to ask you that. Like, I was going to ask you if like local politicians were active on these social platforms.
Yeah, they are, especially Instagram. I'll send you some afterwards because I can't remember their Instagrams off the top of my nor their names, honestly. It's kind of embarrassing. But I will say that there is a very young wave of people coming in politics in these small local positions that newspapers and big media is not picking up on right now, which I'm kind of like might be a good thing because who knows what will happen if some older generations find out we have some like 26-year-olds like in local elections,
Hmm.
younger 30-year-olds. So there is this wave of young rising politicians that are doing it in a very natural, organic way of moving themselves up the ranks. And they're on the platforms that we're on. So I would say that this is also going to be the year, I think, a lot of sleeper elections, like a lot of young people sneaking into positions of politics, which is going to be very exciting. And they're not all just Democrats either, which they shouldn't be. Like we should have young people with differing points of view.
Speak
So
on it.
yeah, like I even read an article about like young Republicans. It's fascinating how young Republicans are thinking differently about their party.
Yeah.
And so none of them stand for the same issues, whether it's abortion, whether it's race, none of them are seeing it the same.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I do you think that there's going to be more with the rise of black businesses, black entrepreneurship, black like closing the wealth gap, do you think that we're going to see more young black Republicans?
Ooh, that's a great question. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Like, I would not be surprised if we do see a larger uptake of like Black young Republicans. I just think, though, what I will give, and I always say this, like the Republican Party eats down at messaging and framing. Like,
Mhm.
they're so strong on their values of like um, family, privatization, religion, and the idea that something has been lost in the past that we need to grab. They're very good at framing all of their messages around that. So I think the struggle is sometimes for Black folks, the way we think about community, the way we think about values, they don't always align with the values of the Republican Party.
Mhm.
I could also see like the Democratic Party has to get its stuff in order. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Democrat myself. I belong to the party. There's no consistent framing, there's no consistent values messaging. So I don't know. That's a great question. But I do think that there is some type of comfort in a party that believes the same things over and over and over again. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a rise
Yeah.
in, yeah.
And like value wise, I think a lot of black people, or not a lot, but like some black people may steer away from the Republican Party. But I do think fiscally, as we see things changing in people's socioeconomic like lives shift a little bit, that may be an option.
Yeah.
Because people don't like, people want their taxes down. They're paying too much money.
Taxes down. And the other thing is, I would argue, like right now, what we're seeing in the country is like, I think fiscally, a lot of people like what Republicans have going on.
Yeah.
Socially, a lot of people are like, but Democrats kind of make more sense. Like, so how do you, it's like, but fiscal Republican values are like the core of American values. Like the idea of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, make your money and spend it how you want to spend it and do what you want to do. Like that's literally the founding of this country.
Mm-hmm.
The democratic social values are much newer, of like a newer generation of America that has not had a voice, honestly, for like a little bit less than a century. So
Sure.
I think that what we're seeing right now, I think politics in the next 20, 30 years of our life is going to be fascinating. And I think it is not going to go in any way as it has gone. um, I don't know. Like I'm not a political expert, so I don't want to speak on like what is going to happen. Like I'm a
Yeah.
trend pastor, but I think nothing that we expect is going to happen in politics in the next couple of years. All it takes is like one black Republican candidate that is able to speak to masses of people and a whole like movement changes. All it takes is like the Democratic Party to like not believe one stance and a huge mass of people moves. So
Are we going to see you run for office someday?
I would.
I feel like you have a future in politics. I really do.
You know what? It's actually been on my, I added it to my vision board like 2 months ago. I was like, oh, and it actually speak on the entrepreneurial mindset. It pivoted in the way of content I was making. Like I stepped more into like my public speaking bag, like making money in that way, like becoming
Yeah.
a youth advocate, because I'm like, if I actually do want to run for office, it's important that I have like a following of people and young people. Like no one is speaking like with, not to, not about, with young people about like
Yeah.
what they want in the country. Because they're like, oh, they're just glued to their iPads. Well, you guys didn't ask them what they wanted. So
No. And I
I
think like you and I had this conversation when we were on the phone the other day about like people kind of have a fear of politics or don't want to like get into it because they see like some old white man just talking and he's the expert. They don't really see themselves in some of these policies, some of these like laws that are going on. But really, like if you're a person in America, like politics matters. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like from just watching your content, you are relatable. Like I think that people could see themselves in you as a politician or somebody like creating change. And so if that is on your vision board, I can't wait to until you
yeah,
manifest that shit because we need Kelsey Russell. Vote for Kelsey Russell.
that's what I was like, I sometimes say, I tell my parents, my mom was gonna name me Crawford. So
Oh,
like,
really?
yes. And I'm like, girl, you did not want me to succeed. A beautiful name. Like a beautiful name.
Like if
But
you were a girl, your name would be Crawford?
yes,
Okay.
yes. And all I could think about is my Instagram name would be Crawdaddy though. Like there's no
Yeah.
doubt it would be Crawdaddy for sure. But I'm like, you're gonna have me, people gonna call me crawfish. Like that's just bad.
It
For
does sound like rich though. Like she
doesn't
knew
it?
what she was doing, like wealthy, like regal, like a
It
very
does
regal name.
it does give like, oh, like yeah, like Crawford's coming tonight. Like, oh, that's I think I would be a different person. But I do thank them. I'm like, you guys gave me the best name on paper ever I could ask for. It's a very like no one knows that I'm black whenever I go anywhere. This has happened on on this journey. So many people that are black in interview, they're like, no one said you were black. When we like checked the page, I was like, well, my name's Kelsey, so I don't think that they would really, you know, assume probably black.
Dead.
Like I have a white girl name. which is fine. Like it gets me far.
It's fine.
But,
You have a
um,
resume. You have a
I have a
resume
resume
now.
name. So I'm like, I might as well run for office. You do too, though. You do too.
Amber, Lauren, Kelsey,
Yeah,
Chelsea.
I'll see all of those.
All-
It's I guess it's palatable for the American population, whoever they are.
I want to jump into entrepreneurship again because
Sure.
we are an entrepreneurship podcast. I
Yeah.
want to know the brand of Kelsey. Like
Ooh,
in the beginning of this episode, I asked you, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? And like, so now after the success that you've had, like, what does being an entrepreneur look like for you? Like, who is Kelsey Russell as a brand?
that's a great question. I'm gonna
And
answer.
how is Kelsey Russell getting this money?
Great question too. Knowing is sexy. Like it is one of the hottest things that you can do for yourself. One of the most beneficial things you can do for yourself is be curious. Like I feel like my brand revolves around curiosity, exploration, um, decoding shame. Like, but more importantly, doing that all intergenerationally. That was a lot going on in that answer. But truly, like the idea of knowing is sexy. And the only way you will know is if you remain curious and consistently ask people from different generations and different walks of life from you. That's the only way you're going to know anything. You will never know enough. Um,
Wow. Wait, tell me a little bit about that. Do you have an agent?
no, I don't. I'm in the process though of finding one, working with an agency, and it was a TikTok creator that I spoke to. Um, he's like the medical myth buster. Can't remember his name right now. This black, he's a black male in medical school, does like a lot of busting medical racial myths. And my aunt works at she works at BET and she was working with him and she's like, I'd love to connect you all. Joel, his name's Joel. And I asked him, I was like, how are you making money? Like, how does this work? Because he and I, and similar to other creators who are like in that education space, I cannot put a product in front of you and sell it. Like it
Mm,
won't probably happen, and it's not organic to my brand. And he said he was making the most money off of public speaking. He was like, at first, it was thousands like here and there. And now it's like he's making about like 5 figures for a speaking engagement. Yes. Like,
okay.
yes. So public speaking is really where it's at. And I've always loved public speaking. So
Yeah.
that is how primarily most of my money is coming in right now is speaking engagements.
So are we going to see like a Kelsey Russell media brand anytime soon?
I would love for like to have my own media conglomerate. I would absolutely love that. It's on my vision board, it's on my goals and strategically um it's actually my sister's ex. He texted me and he was like, "Love what you're doing on TikTok." I was like, "Thank you, thank you." And he was like, "But just remember he's in media himself." He was like, "But just remember it's rented space." And I was like,
Mm,
"Oh, you're so right. Like this is the time and this year for me is about getting my face in a bunch of different places in front of a bunch of different audiences, specifically those that aren't as comfortable on TikTok.
okay.
That's why public speaking has become so important to me is because one, it's a great lucrative way to make money, but also these are the people who I actually really need to be working with, who are like already, they are asking to come see a TikToker speak, paying so much money because I guess they don't want to get on the app themselves and they want to learn.
So
So
wait, they want you. So yeah, so when you come and speak, are you talking about how you became a viral sensation?
yeah, sometimes it'll be like about specifically print media.
Okay.
So like a lot of like conglomerates right now, like media companies focused on like digital literacy, like the transition we're making in AI. So they'll have panels, I'll speak on those. It can kind of the fortunate and grateful thing about my brand is it can kind of expand to a bunch of different things. And also like when it comes to community service, like I will never be paid for that. Like that is if it speaks to me, don't pay me.
Yeah.
Like in a couple weeks, I'm going to speak at like a Brooklyn charter school, like to the girls about like, building your own brand because so many of them do want to be influencers. Like that is the new, I want to be a pop star, I want to be a TikTok star.
Yeah.
Talking to them about that. So I can kind of talk about a lot of things, which is the good thing about my brand.
I'm really proud of you, Kelsey, because
Yeah.
I think that as an influencer, that is, you talk to any kid today and that's what they want to be, an influencer. And I was watching one of your videos and it was a white influencer, and you talked about how, white influencers make all of this money and black women who are influencers are making the same content and not nearly making anything near what those white influencers are making. And I think that that's the conversation we talk about a lot. And instead of just sitting and being like, this fucking sucks, it's not fair, like you really carved your own lane. And what started off as like reading a newspaper and teaching people how to annotate and really like, you know, challenging your mind to read different things, you're now taking on different avenues that like you probably didn't even know existed. And you're changing what it means to be an influencer. And I think that's why I wanted to talk to you, because like that's so inspiring.
Oh, those words were very kind, and I thank you.
Now I'm about to tear up.
Yeah, no, thank you. I will say that it's been you have got to figure out your own lane because this like is a sickness. Like being on TikTok is sickening. Like it's fun and I said I have fun, but at the end of the day, I'm consistently checking likes. I'm consistently checking comments. Like I have had to build in systems so where I can only check my comment and my notifications at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. because anything in between will probably make me feel sad because I
Yeah.
didn't get as many views as I want. But if I wait 12 hours, they'll be there, most likely. So, but part of that is if you stay on TikTok, you will get so caught up on TikTok. Like my followers aren't growing. This video didn't do as well. So I knew for my own sake, I had to find other avenues. So like when these speaking opportunities come, it's like, yeah, I'll do it. Or even like when I come across articles that have interesting places, journalists, like I reach out to them and they invite me to things. They're like, oh my God, I have this event coming up. So I know that like I might not be the TikTok follower that ends up, I might not be the TikTok account that ends up having like 2 million followers. And I'm okay with that. But what I'm not okay with is only being on TikTok. That's when I'm like, this is so I appreciate you acknowledging that. And that's what I want young people to know. It's so okay to want to be an influencer, but then what?
Hmm.
Like, then what do you do? Because I haven't seen an influencer yet really figure out that is black, honestly, like then what?
Hmm.
It's not built on their I mean, Jackie Ayan is honestly one of the only ones I've really seen do it.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure there's other ones I can think of, but even everything is still like like how do you do it in a way that isn't oversharing? Like
Hmm.
your your life, your insides of your homes, your relationships. Like I feel like it's important for young people to figure out if they want to be an influencer, does it have to be dependent on all these private moments of your life? Because that is a lot.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, like, does your hair have to be done? Your nails done? Everything to like all the time?
That no,
Like,
literally, like I cannot tell you a lie. I was going to ask to reschedule this because I have a hair appointment tomorrow and I was like, I'm so tired of this damn wig on my head and I just want to ask Amber if I can reschedule. But I was like, no, because girl, you're beautiful. Like, you know
yeah,
what
you
I mean?
are.
And also,
Yeah.
thank you. And but also like you are on here to speak about something that you're passionate about and your mind going to your hair, let it be.
Yeah.
Like, these white girls get on here with the messy bun. And like, yeah, like I know like my hair didn't look good, but like I'm still hot and I'm
Yeah.
still so it's kind of like, you lost this one. You lost this one. You lost. You lost.
Elsie, what can we expect from you in 2024?
You can expect to see my faces in a lot more places. You can expect me to probably make some mistakes along the way for sure, as we're human. Um, and you can expect, yeah, you can expect to see I like that. Expect to see my face in a lot more places.
Hmm.
Expect some mistakes and expect more um I won't say consistency because I'm consistent, but I would say more of a schedule with the type of posting I'm going to do. I'm really aiming to have my weeks centered around like this week is all local media.
Hmm.
I hope next week if it speaks to me, maybe it'll all be from the financial money pages of different newspapers. But I hope to provide um more consistency in the type of content per week I'm giving people, versus the system that I have now where I just kind of speak to what makes me move, what moves me. I
Mm-hmm.
want people to know, like, hey, when I come on her account this week, she's talking about all articles from the arts section. So that's what I can expect. That's what I hope. I had a podcast in the making. Expect me not to talk about that until I decide what I want to do with it. Don't ask me about it because I jumped the gun and expect me to shut the hell up about things that I don't know what I want to do with
You
yet.
said I don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah, I did. That's why I said, like, kudo, like, props to you for doing this because I don't think people realize how much work a podcast takes.
Oh, I don't sleep.
Yeah, no, you don't. And I was like, I don't know if this is something I can lose sleep over quite yet in my life.
Yeah.
So I just say anybody who is doing a podcast consistently, you are doing the damn thing. Because that is
Except if you're a man. I think they need to take microphones from boys.
no, they do because it's not one, you're not funny. And we need to
Yeah.
honestly, there needs to be some type of screening. Like, just because you have enough money to book the studio does not mean you should have the podcast. Like, we have got to create some sort of we got to create an application somehow. Yes,
Before I let you go, I want to play rapid fire with you.
do it.
Okay. So you love to travel.
I do.
What's your dream travel destination?
Oh, good question.
You're like,
Um,
where have I already not been?
no, not even that. Not even that. I actually, you know what? I have a newspaper clipping back here. It's kind of corny that I said that, but it's all of these best places to see the sunset in South America. And I like
Stop.
really feel like I really want to get to South America soon. I've never been. And especially like reading more about Ecuador. Like, it's just on my list, every single place there. So I'm just gonna have to go with
Mm,
yeah.
okay. And just 1 second. Okay. Morning person or night owl?
Oh, night owl. I hate the morning.
Oh, dang. I love the mornings. The most rewarding moment in your career so far.
The most rewarding moment in my career. You know, I talked about the Posse scholarship that I had in undergrad. And are you meaning my TikTok career or just life in general?
TikTok career.
What's your TikTok career? Okay. Yeah, I would say I did a collaboration event with Linktree. It was the first time like I ever had a flight and hotel paid for, and my mom like flew out last minute, and my sister, she lives outside of LA, and her husband, and like my friend who's in medical school in LA, my other friend who like works in media in LA, all came to the event.
Oh,
And it was so rewarding because like that's what I love is like to go to events and have my friends and community come because I'm like if I'm not sharing it with them, what the I don't want to do. I don't want to go. So that
you
was
got flued out. That's when you know
that
you
was
made it.
that. It was my first time getting flued out. It was so I was like, oh my gosh. I definitely have to tell the woman I was sitting next to on the plane. Okay. I had no shame. I had no shame.
I love it. And I love that it wasn't like a boy. It was like for my career.
I
I'm
was
getting flued out for my
like,
career.
yeah, it was my friend, a white woman. She follows me on TikTok to this day. So, yeah, and we both fell asleep. Like we both had 2 glasses of wine and we're knocked out like an hour into the flight.
I love that. If you could have dinner with any woman who inspires you, living or historical, who would it be?
Oh my God. Oh, Princess Diana.
Oh, why?
We're both cancers. Not even that, but like I just finished The Crown. And I think that it would have been, I would just love to sit down for dinner and talk about what she envisioned if her time wasn't so short. Like, I don't know why she has just been really, I've been fascinated with her recently.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like she's one of those people that I question if she knew the impact she was making on like, she literally made a whole country deal with their emotions, which many people cannot do. So I would love to just ask her about
Yeah,
that.
especially in the UK where that's not a thing to talk about your emotions or deal with your emotions. She was definitely before her time.
No, at all. And I was gonna another one that came to mind was Patricia Hill Collins. Oh, she's alive. But I kind of want to also just key with somebody. Like I want to have a little bit of a lighter hearted conversation. And I think Princess Diana and I would have a time.
I love that. When you're not working, where can we find you?
Ooh, at home. Probably at home or at a dinner, like at a dinner reservation at 9 p.m. Like for sure at a somewhere in New York eating dinner with my friends or on an aimless walk. Like literally walking absolutely anywhere in the city.
Where's your go-to New York spot? Like,
Oh, for like dinner or like what?
mm-hmm.
Hmm,
Yeah.
that's a great question. Honestly, I'm such an annoying when people ask this. It so depends on the crowd. Like it really depends on the crowd, and I don't think I have found, like, that restaurant that I take oh, no, shoot, I'm kidding. Weigh-in, and, I think is it East Village? I don't know, I can't remember where it is right now. I would take anybody there. It's like an Indonesian French cuisine. Like,
Oh,
so everything on the menu is, like, to die for. Service
damn.
impeccable, everything.
Okay, well, I'll be taking a trip to come see you, so we'll
As
go
you
there.
should, as you should.
The best platform to help you stay organized.
Ooh, Google Calendar. Google
Google, like everyone, there's all those apps like on Instagram. They're like, download this, download, and I'm like, Google though.
Yeah, like add if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not, or it's not, no one needs to know what happened. That's the only reason it's not on my Google Calendar, literally. Yeah.
Facts. Okay, so we often see you eating your breakfast during your TikTok newspaper reads. What's your ideal breakfast?
Mm. Oh, like an all-star special from Waffle House. Like, you know what I mean? Like waffle, bacon, eggs,
Yo,
green.
I forgot you were an Atlanta
Yeah,
girl.
like I need like that good old like diner breakfast is my favorite breakfast. And a vanilla Coke. Like if I'm at Waffle House, I will be drinking a vanilla Coke at like 10 a.m. in the morning. Like
Yo, what? You're funny as hell. Okay, wait. So like a good old waffle and a vanilla Coke.
like a
Yum.
Waffle House All-Star special is
Yeah.
my ideal breakfast for
So are
sure.
you like a sweet or savory girl?
Interestingly enough, I am a savory person for breakfast, but like Waffle House, when you just thought of my ideal, like that's what I thought about. But usually I'm savory. I love eggs. Like eggs have to be in my breakfast, some way, shape, or form. Like
Mm,
love an egg. You can throw anything in it. I don't care.
I'm a bacon girl. I need bacon like for
Oh yeah.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I have my pork like grease in the my bacon grease in the fridge.
Yo, and I was cracking up when when your mom. Wait, did your mom gift you like a little thing to
Yeah,
put
I
your
have
bacon
it.
grease?
Oh, it's my
Yes, please bring that out. I want to see it because that's genius.
yes. I did. And you know what? You can put this in your podcast.
Where's it from?
You can put this in there. For anyone who doesn't eat pork, you're missing out. This is my bacon bin with all
Okay.
of my bacon fat in it. It has like a strainer, so it like has all the bacon grease.
And then you just pour it back into the
And you,
pan.
and you just pour it back. Yeah, you just pour it into here and it
Uh,
strains it for you. And then this is my ham hock broth that when I cook and I need like broth, I'll like, boil random meats and I keep all the broth. So if I ever need to make something,
Yo, do you cook a lot?
I do. I do. I love to cook.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so what's a song that would describe your year so far?
Ooh. Can I look on my phone?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, great question.
If you're not a politician, you'll be a comedian because you're just like, and I know you're not even trying to be funny. Like you're just being normal. And I think that's the part that's so funny.
No, I literally don't even. Oh, My Prerogative by Bobby Brown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not expect you to do a throwback.
Yes, My Prerogative by Bobby Brown. I've been listening to that so much. Like, it's my prerogative. Like, everyone's talking all this stuff about me. Let me
Literally.
live.
Literally, it's a bop. Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
love
a
that.
bop. It's a bop. It's Whitney Houston was actually I wanted to go to dinner with her, but I was like, I'm gonna choose Princess Diana.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's probably like safer.
Yeah, I'm saying I feel like we get into some bad business together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me. I mean, you would be fun though.
No, it would be fun. It would be really fun. But I was like, I'll choose the people's princess.
Yes. Okay. So, what's your guilty pleasure TV show?
I mean, I love Housewives, but I'm not even guilty. I'm not even guilty. I don't what is my guilty pleasure TV show? I'm a big Jersey Shore fan, but I don't even
Okay.
think that bad to watch. Like, yeah, Bad Girls Club. I don't know.
Bad Girls Club.
Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. Jocelyn's Cabaret.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of the Zeus shows.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's not good for society for sure. Like making women compete, strip and stuff. It's not good. They get me
Okay. But it's entertaining.
a very. It's like we're the damn double homicide. Heard that sound? Have you heard that sound? Oh, it's like this sounds like damn double homicide. It came from.
Is it on TikTok?
It was a trending sound on TikTok. It was.
Damn, I missed that. I missed that wave. Where can people find you?
Instagram, TikTok, email, not Twitter. Don't look at that. And LinkedIn. It's all Kelsey Russ. KLSCRUSS.
Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me, Amber.
Thank you, Kelsey. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea. Today's guest was Kelsey Russell, social media content creator teaching media literacy to Gen Z. Follow Kelsey as she reads the newspaper on TikTok at Kelsey Russell. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. And shout out to my amazing editor, Chris, for the edits each and every week. If you have a bright idea or a topic you think I should cover on the show, hit me up on social media or email me at jacksonstreetmediaco.com. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.